So there's two prayers going on now. One is mine. I'm saying the fighter pilot prayer, God, don't let me mess up. The other prayer is my wife saying, don't let him embarrass me. So we're going to talk kingdom-mindedness. I'm no authority, and I am the least of all the sinners in the world here. So just some things to think about, and as we determined in our search for what we're going to be when we grow up in our continued journey as a congregation, we determined that being kingdom-minded is the way we should dictate things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So here's the topics we're going to hit. I won't belabor them. They'll come up here in a second. So, okay, don't run for the doors. It's called a Venn diagram, but here's the important thing, and it's not the first time you've seen it. What it does is it captures the essence of all the things that go on in any organization, and where the overlaps are and what the main themes are. And really the most important thing is the three top items, the love, equip, and share, which is the focus. And that is, if we follow those tenets and have those as our aims, we are indeed going to be kingdom-minded. And it comes from two separate utterances of Jesus when he was on earth, really, and that was when he was challenged by the ruling class then about what was the most important commandment. It was to love your God and to love your fellow man. And then on the way out, the Great Commission said that we were supposed to go out, baptize, and share the word. That's your equip, and that's your share portion. All that other stuff is how we make the sausage, all right? And a lot of that is just administrivia, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. But the kingdom-mindedness of it are those top three things. So, left and right kingdom, a wonderful teacher of ours, Tom Rake. I don't know if he made it up, but he was the first person I ever heard talk about kingdom, the left kingdom and the right kingdom. But that's a perfect, wonderful illustration to understand that we exist in two worlds, if you will, and that's God's world, the right kingdom, and that he's king of that domain, and then the left kingdom. And there's lots of people that think they're in charge of the left kingdom, including the devil, right? But Jesus recognized that we needed to live in the one and try and get along in the one, but we aspire and yearn to be in the other. So a couple New Testament references. Matthew 22. If you might remember how, the Sadducees were trying to trip up Jesus and asked him about his views on taxes. Hopefully he would say something that would get the Romans mad at him. And his answer was, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and what is God's to God. And therefore there was a recognition that of those two kingdoms, if you will. In John, toward the end of Jesus' ministry, John 19, Jesus is speaking with a notable character. Who is that? Pontius Pilate, right? And Pontius Pilate says, dude, do you not understand? I can kill you or let you go. And he goes, no, I'm sorry. You have no power over me that God my Father has not given you. Right? So we're a recognition of who's in charge and that worldly kingdom and that heavenly kingdom. And then 1 Peter, in the early church, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake. So there was a reason. It was to benefit the Lord by recognizing those human institutions. And last, in Romans, we recognize that we're supposed to be in subjugation to those governing authorities, and what the development of that thought is that they wouldn't exist if God didn't permit them to exist. So, some keys there. So these are just my thoughts on what kingdom-mindedness is and isn't. It's Christ-focused, it's commission-driven, it's not something that comes and goes like the wind. It's not some sort of fad, right? It's enduring, it is eternal, and it's servant-mindedness. As Jesus served us, that was his servant leader. We are to be servant leaders. So it's not about, and if you see my ends up being on that other side, and that is the worldly view, right? It's about me, it's about my agenda, it's about my plans for life, it's about, what's important for me. So you can use that as a guidepost there. And they're coexistent, but they're certainly not co-equal, those two kingdoms. And so what does it look like in practice, in my view, my humble view? If we go back to that most important commandment, if you praise God and talk with him daily, your mindset and your mindedness is going to be that of the kingdom, right? Applying God's standards to every situation, it might be trite, but the little mnemonic of what would Jesus do if you use that, if you apply that to things you've done or are going to do or are doing, and you go, how would that divine standard stand up to what I'm attempting to do? If you keep that in mind, that will keep you in that kingdom-mindedness as you conduct your life. And then we're also admonished in Matthew 6 not to be anxious in life. Now, it's hard, especially in these times, not to be anxious with all the craziness that's going on internally here in the country and with COVID and the whole bit. But we're admonished that God's got our back, okay? We're not to be anxious. We need to think again in divine standards that in the long game we don't really have that much to worry about, right? I've read about a bunch of things. My sister gave me a book that said, don't sweat the small stuff, and then in small letters it says everything is small stuff, and that's generally it. So keep the big things big as God would have us, and then keep everything else in perspective, and then let your light shine before others. Again, we're expected to do that, but it's really our light as comes from the divine. We're just a window of what God is trying to get out there. And it also, we're admonished not to draw attention to ourselves. You know from the New Testament where they're admonished again not to preach and draw attention to themselves in the streets and to have not to flout their generosity in the public because that's your reward. Do it in private, such and such there. But if you do the things that are kingdom-minded, you will draw attention to the glory of God, the kingdom, not to ourselves. And then last, okay, the next time somebody cuts you off, smile rather than doing what you might naturally do by the left kingdom standard. By the way, I failed that to a minor extent yesterday on Mercury Boulevard. And you want to be that person in the office that people migrate to because of that calmness, because as the last statement says, you have seen the big picture, the God's eye view of the big picture, that kingdom that awaits us all. So next week, you're going to have a more talented and animated speaker than I. The Temple Talk will be about the Emmanuel merger from Mike Olin, who is the Emmanuel president. The board and the board of directors and the elders have had some time with Mike, and he'll give you the wonderful perspective they have and the positive outlook that we all have toward that, based on our kingdom-mindedness. Thank you for your time.